Welcome to worship in the Unitarian Universalist Church of Charlotte. As many of you know, we're spending a portion of this year exploring in a variety of ways issues related to cultural justice. We're listening, we're learning, we're asking hard questions, we're expecting no easy answers. Among the areas of cultural justice we're exploring, including in this service, is the long, long struggle for LGBTQ rights. And yet, if you've come today expecting to have reinforced some belief that nothing ever changes, that transformation is some fantasy, you've come to the wrong place. If you came hoping to be bummed out, depleted, to leave under the heavy weight of despondency, well, actually, that was last week's service. The one, thankfully, we all missed because of the winter storm. Today, believe it or not, we celebrate good news. Welcome to each of you, visitor, member, viewer, as we prepare for an exuberant song. Greet someone near you with a warm and enthusiastic welcome.
Ignite this flame in celebration of all those who have helped build the steps that have led us steadily upward into a future of endless possibility. My name is Elizabeth Pruitt, and I'd like to welcome everyone to today's service. Whether you're here in the sanctuary with us, in our alternate worship space in the Bernstein Room, or perhaps watching this service by way of video stream, or watching an archive video of today's service. We're honored to have guests with us here today. Our members would like to greet you following the service. So that we may do so, if you're visiting, please raise your hand. Keep it up. Members, please take note of guests seated near you. After the service, invite them to join you for coffee and conversation in Freeman Hall. Should it enhance your experience of future services, you can find both a large print order of service and a personal hearing assistance device on the table at the entrance to the sanctuary. If you'd like to learn more about us, please fill out a yellow card and place your completed card in an offering basket when it's passed later in the service. Members with a life event to share can do so on the reverse side of the card. You'll find them along with offering envelopes on the clipboards at the end of the row. If you would, please begin passing those down now. Some returning visitors may be interested in hearing about how to become a member. If so, talk with our membership coordinator, Kelly Green, there in the back. Her contact information is on the back of the order. Once again, please accept our welcome to all of you here today. Our first reading today is a poem by Becky Brooks entitled Still Queer in America. We were erased, and still we loved. We were shamed, and still we loved. We were expelled, and still we loved. We were hunted, and still we loved. We were laughed at, and still we loved. We were marketed, and still we loved. We were legislated, and still we loved. We were murdered, and still we loved. We were murdered, and still we love.
Anyone who imagines that the American Roman Catholic Church is a monolith has not read about the life and antics of Dorothy Day. Dorothy Day wrote, "Some people say, what is the sense of our small effort? They cannot see that we must lay one brick at a time, take one step at a time." I couldn't agree more. You hang in with us as long as you can. You need to hear this. We're trying to create a world for you, darling. We're glad you're listening in. Around 2 a.m. on Sunday, July 12th, 1925, two men knocked on an apartment door at 34 East Oak Street in the near north section of Chicago. One was a city detective, the other a newspaper reporter. Despite the lack of a search warrant, they entered. The officer seized property and written material. Then he arrested the 32-year-old occupant, an Army veteran and postal worker named Henry Gerber. What was Gerber's crime? What warranted this stealthy approach, one assuring the story would immediately make the papers? Henry Gerber was born Joseph Henry Dittmar on a late June 1892 day in Bavaria. Accompanied by family members, he entered the U.S. as a young man through Ellis Island, finding his way then to Chicago. 4 years later, he would be briefly committed to a mental hospital because, you see, Henry Gerber was identified as a homosexual. Interned as a German alien enemy during World War I, upon his release, ironically, he served with the U.S. Army of Occupation in Germany from 1920 to 1923. While there, Henry Gerber read German gay literature and learned about the German homosexual emancipation movement. He met Magnus Hirschfeld, a German physician and defender of gay rights who was working to repeal the law that criminalized homosexuality. Gerber came back inspired. Returning in 1924 to Chicago with its emerging gay subculture, he was hired by the post office. He then began to work to establish an organization to advocate for gay rights. With a few others, on December 10th, 1924, 94 years ago this past week, Gerber submitted the charter for the Society for Human Rights. It was the first gay rights organization in the United States. They began publishing a newsletter called Friendship and Freedom. However, gay readers were afraid to subscribe because at that time, Chicago's postal censors were cooperating with the police to help identify anyone who was receiving homosexual literature so they could be punished as a sexual deviant. The society never attracted more than a few members. After a short time, it ended abruptly. The wife of one of the co-founders reported her bisexual husband to a social worker who then contacted the police. Early on that July 1925 Sunday, Gerber and several others were arrested and prosecuted for deviancy. Years later, Gerber would recall the experience. At the police station, I was locked up in a cell, but no charges were made against me. A friendly cop at the station showed me a copy of the Examiner. There, right on the front page, I found this incredible story: strange sex cult exposed. Gerber went through 3 costly trials. He lost his entire life savings. He was fired from his job for conduct unbecoming a postal worker. His case was finally dismissed only because of the officer's failure to obtain a search warrant. None of his documents were ever returned. He was bankrupt. He was jobless. There would not be another gay rights organization in Chicago for 30 years. Gerber's humiliating experience had a long precedent in our nation. Since colonial times, members of the LGBTQ community were certainly not accorded liberty or the pursuit of happiness, and were on occasion denied their very lives. Early colonial accounts from Virginia and from Massachusetts record those caught engaging in same-sex relationships receiving punishments from public whipping to death. Massachusetts had a law on its books against cross-dressing from the late 17th century. After declaring and winning independence, the young nation didn't follow the Enlightenment lead in decriminalizing personal sexual behavior. Instead, for more than 2 centuries, the United States continued to make homosexuality a social aberration and a punishable offense. Eventually, science would team up with religion, the former calling homosexuality a mental disorder, the latter an abominable sin. Young Henry Gerber had immigrated to a nation posing serious threats to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, just for the crime of being who he was. As the first gay rights organization came crashing to the ground, there was, less than a century ago, no reason to believe this reality would ever change. What could possibly make anyone think that this homophobic, transphobic, heterocentric nation could ever be transformed? Some believed nonetheless. These kept pushing, fighting, marching, singing, dancing. They kept demanding, insisting, creating upheaval, creating discomfort. They kept advocating. They kept working in and out of the political process. They kept praying, and they kept believing. My friends, in the recent midterm elections, 161 people who identify as LGBTQ were elected to office. Just how cynical and historically mistaken would you have to be to claim nothing ever changes? The fight, and it has been a fight. The fight some of us have been in for decades has created remarkable change. Change. It has happened. It can happen. That great heroine of the Catholic worker movement, Dorothy Day, admitted, some people say, what is the sense of our small effort? What is the sense of our small effort? Our taking time deliberately, carefully to listen and to learn. What does it matter? Oh, Dorothy Day responds, some cannot see that we must lay one brick at a time, take one step at a time. Transformation is slow. Transformation is painfully slow. Transformation is the journey of one step after another. Transformation is built up brick by brick by brick. But it is possible. It is possible. Now, I'm not naive. I don't believe that change is necessarily permanent. The threats remain real, the humiliation, the hate, they remain real. We cannot rest. History teaches hard lessons. Freedoms won can be lost again. The rolling down river of justice can diminish to a trickle and evaporate altogether in the scorching heat of injustice. Closet doors of all kinds must be unhinged, taken down, turned into scrap, or better yet, made into tables at which all can gather to eat, lest these doors become again barriers, impediments. The skeletal framework of court victories and civic accomplishments must be enfleshed in hearts and in hands and in voices where love and not legalities becomes our guide. We cannot rest. And along this way, we must celebrate. We must notice and appreciate and acclaim, and we must revel. We must revel in change. Real change. By all accounts, the initial gay rights organization in the U.S. was a complete failure. Short-lived with a shame-filled conclusion. It didn't seem to make any difference at all. However, now, with the benefit of decades of perspective, Henry Gerber's home in Chicago is on the National Historic Registry. Henry Gerber is acclaimed as an early hero in the struggle for LGBTQ justice. He lived long enough to learn about New York's Stonewall Uprising. All of us with a personal stake in LGBTQ justice stand on the unlikely shoulders of Henry Gerber. Today is a day to celebrate, to use awareness of change to refortify and reinvigorate us. Today's a day to remember with immense gratitude the courage of those who led us in this struggle. In the words of Michael Adams, you'll find them on the cover of your order. We stand on the shoulders of our elders like Henry Gerber, and we lock arms with them. We lock arms with them to face the future. We refuse to be quiet. We refuse to be quiet. Read these words with me. They're on the cover of your order. It's the last sentence. We refuse to be quiet. We refuse to let hatred win. And we refuse to be invisible. Take heart. Take courage. Take one more step. And one more step. And one more step.
I came out as a lesbian in the early 90s. It was a time when queer activism was becoming more and more visible across the country, and there were even inroads here in the South. My favorite place in town was a bookstore called Rising Moon Books and Beyond on East Boulevard. It was owned by two openly lesbian women at a time when there were very few ways to connect and communicate with other LGBTQ people. You have to keep in mind that the internet was not what it was today. There was no such thing as social media, and the only queer meeting spaces in Charlotte were dimly lit, smoke-filled bars. Sue and Barbara's store allowed people to connect with a community that for the most part was hard to find. And as cliche as it may sound, the store was an oasis for the queer community. It was a place where you could be yourself and briefly unload the burdens of living an otherwise secret life. Sue had a way of speaking that was nurturing and empowering, and that opened for me the possibility of living an out life right here in the heart of the Bible Belt. It was there that I learned about the 1994 Pride Festival that was to be held in Charlotte. It was a multi-day celebration that included queer-produced films, a day dedicated to educational workshops, a dance held for the first time in a very public venue, and of course, the all-important parade. Under the leadership of Dan Kirsch and Sue Henry, the Pride event yielded a profit, and that seed money was used as foundation for the next queer organization. The Out Charlotte Festival was created with a mission to raise up and celebrate the culture of the LGBT community. I was thrilled to be asked to join the steering committee, and it became a very emboldening part of my coming out process. Now, the notion of having a week-long festival celebrating queer culture in Charlotte in the 90s was not exactly met with open arms. The homophobic pushback came from all sides. I recall listening with Dan Kirsch to the daily messages on the Out Charlotte answering machine. He never dwelled on the hate-filled rantings that we often received. He simply erased them and moved on to focus on the questions and requests from so many others who were excited and often quite desperate for an event like Out Charlotte. The backlash from Charlotte's political leaders was predictably swift. One of the Queen City's more notorious politicians proclaimed that Charlotte would certainly not want to be known as the San Francisco of the South. Obviously, the irony of his own words was completely lost on Pat McCrory, but oh, what fun we had with him. Please join us for Out Charlotte and help us transform Charlotte from a homophobic backwoods town to a city that will one day be known as the gay Mecca of the South. Out Charlotte was not a political organization. However, our very existence was political, and the annual October celebration of National Coming Out Day made the event a bit of a lightning rod. One of the significant steps forward we made was securing advertising on Charlotte city buses and the up-down pedestrian walkway over 5th Street. Having the words lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender publicly posted on outdoor advertising was a real coup for our organization. Shortly after contracting for that advertising, we were contacted by a prominent local Democratic Party leader who suggested that Out Charlotte needed to reconsider its advertising strategy at a time so very close to the November election. This has the potential to cause an upset in our local races. Well, thank goodness for that. Needless to say, the steering committee was absolutely delighted at the possibility of creating discomfort for the good liberal citizens of the Queen City. I recall with great joy that day that the advertising went up and the feeling I had posing with the rest of the steering committee under that 5th Street banner. I think now with deep gratitude of those who walked before and beside me during those years. I have fond memories of time spent at Rising Moon and listening to the affirming sound of Sue's voice and the knowledge I gained from hearing so many others in that space. I cannot recall a single message from that Out Charlotte answering machine, but I do remember the surge of power that came from using that erase button. Reflecting back on this period has given me time to think about all the progress that has been made in our community. Taking time to celebrate and remember puts life into perspective, and for a while keeps me from getting bogged down in the onslaught of the 24-hour news cycle and the most recent ranting from an inane tweet.
One of the heroes. Thank you, Elizabeth, and to your colleagues for helping to create the community that I want to live in. Today's opportunities continue with our next youth-led Snackin' Sunday conversation at 12:45 in Freeman Hall. Of the many ways to connect and to engage in the life of this congregation, just a few appear in today's order of service, many more in our e-newsletter Currents. Members can also anticipate receiving our next issue of the publication Soundings tomorrow in a special email message. All others can always read it on our congregation's website. Our deep thanks to all generously pledging members whose financial support is essential and makes possible everything that we are doing. If December is your month to communicate your annual pledge, today is the day to do so. The table is up in Freeman Hall. Thank you in advance for your responsible attention to this. Your choice helps respect the time of your fellow members who are canvassers and members of our stewardship team. How often in recent days our hearts have been heavy with the weight of loss and grief. Today we hold with love and in our prayers Suzanne and Thad Clements and their family in the loss of Suzanne's beloved aunt. Karen and David Duvall as they are grieving the loss this week of Karen's mother. We continue in sympathy with Dick, Simone, and Suzanne Lake in the death of their daughter and sister, and with Kathy Height and Jim Morrill in the tragic death of their son. Today we hold with special love and collective grief the family and friends of our dear member, Judy Goneem, who died this week. We will gather to celebrate Judy's life in a memorial service on this Wednesday at 2 p.m. here in the sanctuary. Losses, concerns are also held in the private realm of our hearts. Some may wish to memorialize, celebrate, or mark a particular concern with the lighting of a single candle. All are invited, visitor and member alike, to do so later in the service when the offering music is being played. So now another of the heroines on whose shoulders we stand. The novelist Marguerite Radcliffe Hall, who in a groundbreaking 1920s novel had this message to lesbian lovers. You're neither unnatural, nor abominable, nor mad. You're as much a part of what people call nature as anyone else, only you're unexplained as yet. You've not got your niche in creation, but some day that will come. And meanwhile, don't shrink from yourself. Don't shrink from yourself. But face yourself calmly and bravely. Have courage.
Turn a phrase into a weapon or a drug. You can be the outcast or be the backlash of somebody's lack of love. Or you can start speaking up.
Nothing's gonna hurt you the way the words do when they settle neath your skin. Tucked on the inside with no sunlight, sometimes a shadow wins. But I wonder what would happen if you say what you want to say and let the words fall out. Honestly, I want to see you be brave with what you want to say and let the words fall out. Honestly, I want to see you be brave. Just want to see you. I just want to see you. Everybody's been there, everybody's been stared down by the enemy, fallen for the fear and done some disappearing, bow down to the mighty. Don't run, just stop holding your tongue. Maybe there's a way out of the cage where you live. Maybe one of these days you can let the light in. Show me how big your brave is. Say what you want to say and let the words fall out. Honestly, I want to see you be brave with what you want to say and let the words
Thank you. Wow. Thank you. Please join me in meditation and aspiration. O love, beyond all knowing, beyond all naming, in our deepest hearts we imagine that each of us was fashioned in your image, that within the inner reaches of our souls there resides that spark, that sacred light, that clear and unmistakable connection to all that is good and true and beautiful. Whenever any deprecate or demean, threaten or bully or berate, may we be guided by love's relentless inner glow. May none cause us to question our worth or to compromise our dignity. May we know in this moment the truth of our goodness and our beauty. Our beauty.
Let us take time today to celebrate the progress that has been made on LGBTQ rights, recognize that there is always more work to be done, and continue to support the Unitarian Universalist mission through a contribution of time and financial resources. We'll now accept the offering. Please join me in an affirmation of our faith, rising in body and or spirit. Because of those who came before,
I entered this fight personally in the 1980s when we were losing so many of our peers and our lovers. And I imagined that I was simply laying one more brick, taking one more step in a huge community of people who are fighting for the world in which we all wanted to live. I didn't know then what I know now. Who I was fighting for in the next generation. I'm so glad our middle and high school kids are here today to understand at the core of all of what we're about how important this is. And for you, and for all of us, those words from Denise Levertov, how could we tire of hope? How could we tire of hope? So much is in bud. How can desire fail? We have only begun to imagine justice and mercy. Please be seated.